What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you have experienced? My grandparents' glitch story, my absolute favorite. So I've heard this story a million times and I absolutely love it. My favorite glitch story. Been meaning to write it a while, so here we go. So when my grandparents were very young, right after they got married, they went to Devon for their honeymoon. This was about 60-ish years ago. Now, they'd been to Devon many times in a similar spot, and so they are reasonably familiar with the area. They decided to go on an afternoon stroll one afternoon down a forest track. After about half an hour or so, they stumbled upon a gorgeous old worldly tea room, and so they decided to go in for a little snack. My grandmother had a tea cake, my granddad a scone and a pot of tea between them both. They particularly enjoyed the tea and asked what brand it was so they could purchase it for themselves. What struck them most about this quaint little tea room was how old-fashioned it was. Even the waitresses were wearing uniforms which seemed very out of date but were still smart, and everyone was busy working hard. They spoke again to their waitress, paid and complimented how wonderful it was. After about a week they decided to return because they had enjoyed it so much and they were eager to get another cup of that tea. So off they went, down the path, and they took every single step exactly as they remembered to get to the tea room. When they finally reached where it should be, which wasn't difficult to remember the route, they came to a dead end, no tea room, just a wall of row upon row of adult trees. They just couldn't understand it. It was absolutely impossible. They had followed the route perfectly and yet there was absolutely no sign whatsoever of this tea room. Confused and dumbfounded, they wandered around the woods a bit more, putting it down to their own silliness and just getting lost. After a while they crossed paths with an elderly woman who was walking her dog, and they stopped and asked her where they could find the little old-fashioned tea room. The woman looked confused and told them there was no such tea room in the forest and that she had lived in the area her whole life so she would know. My grandparents started to feel delusional, and they told the woman that they had actually been here a week ago and had actually gone in for a bite to eat and drink, so it was impossible. The woman seemed very confused and said they must be mistaken. The only tea room which was in the woods had been closed down many years ago, even before my grandparents were born, but she had been to it as a little girl. After pressing the woman a little harder and describing the tea room with as much detail as they could remember, even down to the tea brand, she seemed dumbfounded and agreed it sounded exactly like the tea room she remembered as a child. They parted ways and joked that it must have been a slip in time. My grandparents still tell this story with so much detail it facilitates me, and whilst my grandmother might tell a tall tale or two, my grandfather is the most humble and honest man and he cannot explain what happened, but even when he tells the story now he gets goosebumps. I think it's an amazing story and by far my favorite glitch tale. The funniest thing is, the tea brand still existed after all those years and they drank it for absolute donkey's years before it got too expensive for them to send from Devon. Edit. So I had a small message exchange with Mum to gather a bit more information. She said this: it was 1956 in Ilfracombe, Devon, between the 2nd and 9th of September. They searched all over for the tea rooms with the ladies in old-fashioned dresses and pinnies. Something else happened that week too. They visited a place called Chambercombe Manor and asked a man for directions. As they were on foot, he told them which way to go, and when they turned round, he wasn't there. Chambercombe Manor is online. Look it up. I have searched for that tea room, been online, looked at old photos and never found anything. It was pre-decimal currency, pounds, shillings and pennies, and that currency would have looked the same from 1900 to 1971 when we went metric. Dad's not one for flights of fancy either, and he agrees both incidents happened. Regarding the tea brand, Old England. Am I actually dead? I believe I was killed in a car wreck in 2001. I recall the moment of death when my neck broke. I was not wearing a seat belt and my face hit the area right where the windshield meets the roof. My head, back of my head, touched my back and my neck broke, I think. But in this reality I walked away from the wreck, but everything has seemed off ever since. Like a burn in the top of your mouth that you can't quit plunging your tongue into. It just aggravates my mind. The oddities never stop to remind me that I died. That my consciousness transcended through the multiverse to this reality, but I knew what is happening. It started with just odd things until I came to this conclusion. As we are spread across this multiverse, every choice creating a new dimensional existence, do we all share a consciousness on some level? In the rare occasion does the consciousness in one reality pick up on what happened in a neighboring closer reality? I'm starting to ramble and I've got to clear my head as it's starting to hurt. But ask yourself if the little random oddities in your life are not so random and are actually clues to the truth. The Everett model is correct. Every choice causes another reality to open up and they are infinite. Pray your mind doesn't get spread across multiple realities or you'll eventually end up like me, one domino away from insanity. My boyfriend and I heard my voice saying his name. It was not me. Okay. I have to say that I'm very skeptical about paranormal stuff and such, but this specific incident got me thinking about parallel universes, other dimensions, etc. It happened a half of a year ago, I think. My boyfriend and I were chilling after work. We lived together in a small flat. It was already after midnight. I was laying on the bed. My boyfriend, let's call him James, was standing near the bed, where the phone charger was. I remember I said something, he answered, and right after this, not a single second passed, I looked at him and heard him saying his name in my voice, without his mouth moving. Something like James, very casually. I remember thinking, why would he call himself? Then he freaking turned around and then back, asking, did you call me? It was two of us who, I swear, heard the same voice, my voice, calling his name. And it was coming from somewhere in the air. I don't know. This is so far the weirdest shit I've ever witnessed. I watched a kid disappear off the face of the earth for 10 minutes and then respawn. I originally posted this in r/Reddit before I knew of this sub. When I was a teenager, I worked as a lifeguard in a water park. We had 5 water slides that started from this one tower and ended at a single pool that was line of sight, but with the layout of the park it was a few-minute walk from the slide pool to the top of the slides again. One lifeguard sat at the top of the tower and another would be at the pool at the bottom, so we would signal to each other if someone was messing around on the way down, or if we needed to pause the line for any reason. With the layout of the park, you could not just see the slide pool, but see the entire park from the top of the slide tower. You could even see someone as they walked the entire few-minute path from the slide pool up the slide tower again. The last 2 hours of the day were always really slow on the slides, so I would frequently skip my breaks to sit on top and twiddle my thumbs for the remainder of my shift. Anyways, it's about 30 minutes before closing, and I'm doing my thing chilling on the top of the slides. Only 2 kids, a boy and a girl, were going down the slides and coming back up since there was no line at this point. As I said, it was a long walk, so the boy would come up and go. Then about 2 minutes later the girl would come up and go. 2 minutes later the boy again, etc. Well, the boy comes back up, and he goes down slide 2. Slide 2 is completely enclosed, very fast, under 20-second ride, and has about a 24 diameter. I'm bored, so I lean over the rails, watching the bottom, and never see the boy come out of the slide. A minute later, the girl comes up, and she says she wants to go down slide 2. I tell her to wait a minute, and have her wait while I watch for the boy to come out. He never does. After a solid 2 minutes from me sending him down, keep in mind, it's a fully enclosed 20-second ride, I radio the guard at the bottom and ask if the boy came out. The guard says he never did. Then I scan over the entire park. There's maybe 20 people in the park at this time of day, and I don't see the boy anywhere. At this point, I'm getting confused, but chalk it up to the boy coming down, jumping out the side of the pool, and going to the nearby bathroom. After finally concluding I must be crazy, I send the girl down slide 2. Sure enough, 20 seconds later the girl comes out of the slide and runs off, no issue. A few minutes later, the girl comes back up, goes down slide 2 again, and comes right back out 20 seconds later. So, I go back to waiting for the next person to come up the slide tower, when all of the sudden, the boy comes out of the bottom of slide 2. It had been at least 10 minutes since I had sent him down and the girl had gone through that slide as normal 2 times in those 10 minutes. To this day, I can't figure out what happened. Like I said, slide 2 is fast, narrow, and fully enclosed. There's no way to stop yourself on the way down. Trust me, I've tried. And even if he did manage to stop himself, there is no way that girl could have passed by him at all, let alone unimpeded in the normal 20 seconds. This boy just disappeared off the face of the earth for 10 minutes and respawned in the middle of slide 2 like nothing happened. I've gone over it in my head many times, and to this day have no clue what happened to that boy for 10 minutes. Experienced a car crash this morning that didn't actually happen. So I don't really know how to explain this or if it even fits on this sub or even what actually happened if I'm being honest, but regardless I will try to relay the story. I was driving to work this morning and I'm coming up a side street that connects to a very busy road in my area. It's the main road that stretches through like 20 towns. I get to the red light at this main road and sit there for about 15 seconds before seeing a car pull up behind me. As the car comes to a complete stop behind me, my eyes drift from the rear view mirror to the stoplight in front of me. It was red still. I then looked down to my radio clock and it says 7:36 and, this is going to sound strange, but for a period of time that seemed to stretch on until infinity, I kind of felt like this intense pressure all around me, like I was zoned out and couldn't clear my head or move my body because I was obsessed with the numbers I was seeing, like I was in a trance or something and it wasn't silent around me but it was at the same time, like very very loud, pressing silence. I couldn't move but I also wasn't trying to move, almost like I was paralyzed with fear and knew I was frozen but couldn't really process it or try to move. I really can't explain it. Even now it's so confusing to me. After who knows how long of being stuck in this trance, suddenly everything snaps back to normal. Instantly. The very first thing I register is that the person behind me is laying on their horn. I look up and see the light is green. I begin to drive forward, feeling completely 100% normal again, and once I get into the middle of the intersection, I sensed this large presence to the right, left, of me. I turned my head to look out my driver's side window just in time to see a huge truck coming right at me. It hits me and I could feel my body break. I felt and heard so many of my bones get absolutely crushed. Suddenly I'm upside down in my car, in so much pain I can hardly breathe, covered in glass and I can hear someone screaming. The last thing I remember before I passed out about 10 seconds later was seeing cop lights and distinctly thinking to myself, wow, how did they get here so fast? This is important. The next thing I remember, I open my eyes and I'm sitting in my car at the red light. The intense pain I felt a moment ago is fading fast but it's still there, only almost like a ghost version of itself if that makes sense. I'm intensely confused at this point and I start looking around in a panicky way, and my eyes trail across the clock again. It says 7:36 and I'm I'm beyond confused. I know it wasn't a daydream. It was so goddamn real. I'm frozen in place staring at the clock trying to figure out what the fuck just happened. After about 5 to 10 seconds, I hear the person behind me start to beep at me but I'm shaking and about to cry and so overwhelmed with leftover fear that I can't even react to it. They start to lay on their horn and I still can't move because I'm just so confused and frightened. Now at this point I was starting to calm myself down and trying to rationalize what happened. I was beginning to convince myself that it had to have just been a daydream. It was early enough and I was tired enough that I even started to think I just nodded off at the red light and dreamed the crash. What the hell else could have happened, right? If it weren't for what happened next, I probably would have been able to go the rest of my life believing I had fallen asleep and dreamed it. The moment the clock turned 7:37, like the very second the numbers changed, a huge truck comes barreling through the light, definitely speeding. They ran their red light and crossed right in front of my car. A few seconds later, a cop, who must have just been driving behind the truck in the first place, runs the red light as well, turning on his lights in the process and beginning to pursue the speeding truck. They both drove out of my view within a few seconds. I was so shaken I just pulled my car to the side of the road right where I was and sat there in silence for I don't even know how long. Like, what normal explanation could I possibly come up with for this? There isn't one. I hadn't seen the truck or the cop car before they ran the light in front of me, so how did the dream crash I had include those very specific and very real details? The entire area I live in is covered in trees, so it's not like I can see very far down the road in either direction. I know for a fact I did not see the truck or the cop car before I experienced the crash. I'm still so shaken. How do I rationalize this experience to myself? I feel disillusioned by something, but I don't even know what. I feel like I'm going crazy. I needed to share this with people who won't automatically dismiss this as a hallucination or a dream. Edit, I've been getting messages asking permission to use this story on your own pages, and you all can feel free. If you discuss my exact posting here, I only ask that you credit this profile. Also, please send me a link to whatever you've posted it in just so I can read, listen to, watch it, smile. I heard my uncle's obituary before anyone knew he was dead and found out why he probably died while going through his stuff. This was probably over 8 years ago. This'll be long, but I just wanted to get this out there. I worked at a sewing factory and I didn't have an iPod or a good phone, so I would just listen to the crappy local radio with my earbuds while I sewed and always paid attention when the obituaries came on. I live in a small town and was just bored and curious if I might know anyone. This particular day I wasn't paying much attention and took a bathroom break. When I was in the single bathroom I realized they were already announcing and paid attention. I caught the last name Worth and that the person had worked for NASA and RCA. I thought that was odd because that's pretty unique for someone around here, and my dad's uncle, who we called Uncle Dan, worked for those places a long time ago. Then I was trying to recall the name and I thought they said Daniel Worth. So then I felt shocked because I didn't know if my uncle's name was Daniel, and that was way too much of a coincidence. When I got home I told my boyfriend that I thought my uncle died, and this doesn't have much to do with this, but it was an odd added fact that he had also gotten news that an uncle of his died that day. Anyway, I called my dad to ask if Uncle Dan was okay because I thought I heard his obituary. So he called around and I guess through the grapevine he heard that another uncle just talked to him the other day, so he called back and said he was fine. So 7 days later my dad called me, and when I answered he just said my name and I knew. Then I just started crying as he told me. Someone happened to stop by his house and noticed a strong odor and didn't get a response. He was a total hermit and was always home. Cops ended up finding him and they ended up estimating he had been dead for about 7 days. Just a little bit about him and how I felt about him for context. I only saw him a handful of times throughout my life, but he was my favorite uncle because he seemed so interesting and mysterious. He looked like a wizard with a long white beard and his house was half underground like a hobbit house. He never really left home and he would just sit and chain smoke and had long fingernails. I always thought he didn't seem sad, but his house was smaller and the walls and floor were concrete, like he was in a little dungeon. I really felt for him. My dad told me that a long time ago when my dad was growing up, Uncle Dan was married to a lady named Dorothy, Aunt Dottie, and they were the happiest, in love, outgoing couple. Sadly she ended up passing away, and that's when Uncle Dad made himself his little wizard house. So back to why I think he died. When my family and I were going through his stuff, I found a box of cassettes. I looked through them and found a tape with meditation written on it. I didn't say anything and just borrowed it to check out alone. When I listened to the tape, it was him talking to himself, saying you don't need your medication and just telling himself everything is fine. He was on a lot of medication, especially for his heart. The saddest, sweetest thing I ever heard was at the end of the tape. He sang a song to Dottie and it was so hauntingly beautiful. After all of this I felt really good, like he was letting me know he now knew that he was always my favorite uncle by letting me know first that he had passed and letting me find the tape. Most of all, I'm happy he's with his Dottie. My child doesn't exist. I just had the strangest experience today. I was in the kitchen getting dinner ready and was about to tell my daughter to get ready because her father and sister will be home shortly. I froze because I only have one child, but at that moment in time, my heart and soul knew and loved this non-existent child. At the same time I realized what was happening. I had deja vu of a girl running around the living room who wasn't my real daughter, but in that memory, she was. All of this happened in less than a second, but now I have this strange sense of loss. It's more than a little unsettling. Edited to add, the not my daughter was younger than my real daughter, maybe 3 years old. It wasn't a memory of my real daughter either because they looked different. I can no longer have children, so not a future daughter. Randonautica glitch. So my son used the Randonautica app a few weeks ago. He wanted to find something new, something he's never seen before. The app gave him coordinates to a neighborhood really close to ours. He said when he rode his bike there was a street that he's never seen before. He said all the houses were one level and every single house had someone outside in their front yard working in the yard or just hanging out, and they all said hi to him as he rode by. Every single person said hi. It was like the Truman Show. He said the neighborhood street went on forever, like no end in sight to where the road ended. He decided to turn around and go home. The next day he took us back to where he went. We went to the same place, but he said it looked totally different than when he went there the day before. None of the houses were one level like when he saw them before. They were all 2 stories now. Nothing looked the same. It wasn't even a long road, it was all different subdivisions now. Thoughts? 50 years in 5 seconds. Disclaimer, metric system m equals meters. Yesterday, I was swimming at my local lake. I put my stuff near the water and went in. When I looked back after about 5 to 10 minutes of swimming and diving, I saw that a young couple sat next to my stuff. I kinda felt weird about them. They had this super weird aura. They both were about 20 years old. I remember the towels they sat on, one being red and the other gray. Then I lost my swimming goggles. They fell down to the lake floor. I dived down about 3 meters and came back up, which lasted about 5 to 10 seconds. When I looked at the couple again, because all the time I felt weird about them, they both were really old. They definitely retired. I thought maybe the young couple went home and the elders came to sit there. However, the young couple was nowhere. There were around 10 people in a 50 meters radius, and the towels were the same. At first I thought it was a visual glitch, but after I was walking by, I heard that their voices changed as well.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.